The Nevada sun burned mercilessly across the cracked asphalt as Jackson Reeves scraped invisible grease stains from his already clean hands. It was a nervous tic he had developed over the years, a holdover from the days when he actually worked at Old Sam's gas station before he became the manager. 23 years of working hard in that same place, watching the desert swallow and spit out travelers, like they were just another layer of dust. "How much longer are you going to keep scrubbing those hands, Jack?" "There haven't been any customers in at least 40 minutes, said Donnie, a freckled teenager who was working part-time during the summer to save up for college. "Shut up and go check the oil in the truck on the lift," Jackson replied without any real animosity. The kid was right. The BR-95 was as dead as a graveyard at that hour, with the 110-degree heat keeping any sane person indoors in an air-conditioned room. Jackson walked into the cramped, tiny office, turned on the decrepit fan, and sat down, staring at the framed photograph he kept on his cluttered desk. Eleanor was smiling back at him, her red hair blowing in the wind, her floral dress billowing against the backdrop of the Grand Canyon. This photo had been taken exactly 7 years ago, during their only real trip together after 15 years of marriage. "Just the two of us against the world, cowboy," she had joked as she posed for the photo. 3 months later, Eleanor grabbed her battered leather suitcase, climbed into her 1998 Toyota Corolla, and disappeared without a word, without a note, without even a text message. She drove away without saying goodbye, leaving behind only the echo of an unfulfilled promise and a man still waiting for answers. The familiar chime of the doorbell interrupted his melancholy memories. Jackson stood up automatically, adjusting his battered cap with the faded logo of the Reeves & Sons gas station. A private joke between him and Eleanor, since they'd never had children. A woman walked in, her face partially obscured by oversized sunglasses and a straw hat. There was something vaguely familiar about her, but Jackson chalked it up to the monotony of seeing the same faces in a small town for so many years. "Full tank of gas in the red car," the woman said, slapping 220s on the counter. Her voice was husky, with a faint southern drawl that Jackson couldn't quite place. "For pump?" he asked, taking the money. She nodded, keeping her head tilted down. "You okay, ma'am? It's hot as hell out there. We've got some ice water in the fridge over there," she offered, gesturing to the small cooler in the corner. "I'm fine, thanks." The woman hesitated for a moment before adding, "How's life around here in Rock Springs?" "Still as quiet as ever?" Jackson frowned, puzzled that the stranger seemed to know the local nickname for Clayton Valley, Nevada, a name only the locals used. "Have you been around here before?" The woman seemed tense for a moment. "I've been around here a few times. It's hard to forget a place like this." She looked out the dusty window at the vast desert. "Some cities leave a lasting impression on you, no matter how hard you try to forget them." There was something about the melancholy of those words that touched Jackson. He found himself sharing more than he normally would with a client. "Yeah, this place has a way of holding you back. You think you're only here for a while, and before you know it, decades have passed. Not everyone gets held back," she replied softly. "Some make it out." Before Jackson could respond, the door opened again, and a tall man walked in, hair graying at the temples, clothes too expensive for a regular traveler crossing the Nevada desert. He addressed the woman directly. "We have to go, Laura. The kids are getting restless in the car." Laura. The name meant nothing to Jackson, but there was something about the way the man placed his hand possessively on her back that bothered him deeply. "I'll be right there, Richard." she replied, before turning to Jackson one last time. Be safe. As the woman turned to leave, a strong gust of wind blew the door open, knocking the hat from her head. For a brief moment, no more than a second, Jackson glimpsed strands of red hair and a face that, despite the changes brought on by time, he knew better than his own. Eleanor. The shock paralyzed him. Time seemed to freeze as his mind struggled to process what his eyes had just seen. She quickly retrieved her hat, put it back on, and got out, following the man to a silver Lexus SUV with California plates. In the back seat, Jackson could see small silhouettes. Children. When he finally managed to move, he ran outside, but the car was already speeding down the road, leaving only a cloud of red dust in its wake. That was her, he muttered to no one in particular. Holy shit, that was her. Donnie appeared at his side, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. You okay, boss? You look like you saw a ghost. Maybe you did, Jackson replied automatically, still staring at the spot where the SUV had disappeared down the heat-swelled road. That night, Jackson couldn't sleep. The trailer he'd called home for nearly 2 decades, originally a temporary solution when he and Eleanor had moved to Clayton Valley, felt even more claustrophobic. The thin walls amplified the sound of the desert wind, creating a ghostly whistling that perfectly matched his mood. Sitting on the tiny porch with a lukewarm beer in hand, he tried to make sense of what had happened. Eleanor, or Laura, as she apparently called herself now, was alive and well. She had a new husband, kids, a life completely separate from the existence they'd shared. What the hell? He muttered to himself, using another of Eleanor's favorite expressions. She'd always had a colorful vocabulary, a contrast to her delicate appearance. Jackson pulled out his old cell phone and, with shaking fingers, opened the folder of photos he rarely dared to look at. There was Eleanor at her community college graduation, proudly dressed in her cheap dress she'd bought on sale. Eleanor fixing the engine of the 1967 Mustang they'd restored together and then sold to pay off medical bills when her mother got sick. Eleanor dancing in the tiny kitchen of this same trailer, flour on her face after trying to make pies for the church fundraiser. The Eleanor he'd known was a force of nature in a small body, impulsive, smart, always dreaming of something bigger than Clayton Valley. Early in their marriage, they'd spend entire nights planning how they'd get out of this town, how they'd open their own auto repair shop somewhere near the ocean, how they'd have a house big enough for a family. But then, the debts set in. The temp job at Sam's gas station became permanent. Their dreams were put on hold for just 1 more year. Until, at some point, Jackson couldn't pinpoint, they stopped talking about the future altogether. I never imagined you'd just give up on us, she said to the photo on her phone screen. A sudden memory came to her. Eleanor, 3 weeks before she disappeared, sitting on this very porch, saying in a low but firm voice, I can't do this anymore, Jack. I'm suffocating here. He'd told her he was tired after a 12-hour workday, that they'd talk on the weekend. The weekend came and went, filled with more overtime and silence. And then she was gone. 7 years. 7 years without a word, without a sign, as if she'd been swallowed up by the vast desert. And all that time, he'd floated in a limbo of uncertainty, unable to move forward, unable to close this chapter. Why did you come back? He asked that night. Why now? As if the universe had answered his question, his phone buzzed with a notification. An email from a sender he didn't recognize. Laura Richards, 85 @email.com. With his heart pounding, he opened the message. Jack, I drove through Clayton Valley today for the first time in 7 years. I didn't mean to stop. I definitely didn't mean to see you, but when I saw the gas station still there, with the same ridiculous name we'd invented together, I couldn't go on. I know I owe you an explanation. There are no words that can justify what I did, how I left. It would be easy to blame it on depression, on the feeling of being trapped, on the feeling that life was passing us by while we stood still. The truth is, I was a coward. I couldn't face the disappointment in your eyes when I told you I had to go, even though I knew you wouldn't come with me. I went to California, like we'd always dreamed of. I changed my name, not out of fear, but because I needed to be someone else, someone who could breathe again. I met Richard 2 years later. He's a good man. We have 2 daughters. The life I've built isn't perfect, but it's mine. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I thought you deserved to know that I wasn't in a terrible accident or kidnapped. I simply chose a different path, and as much as I hate myself for saying it, I don't regret leaving, only the way I did it. If you want, I can file the divorce papers after all these years. If you don't respond to this email, I'll understand and won't bother you again. I'm sorry, Jack, for everything. Eleanor, Laura. Jackson read the email 3 times, each word burning into his mind like a hot iron. Years of unanswered questions, sleepless nights, imagining the worst-case scenarios, and now, this, a clinical, almost casual explanation, as if he were justifying missing a dinner party, not abandoning an entire life. His first reaction was pure rage, a feeling so intense that his hands shook. He typed out a furious response, full of curses and accusations, detailing every agonizing moment he'd spent not knowing whether she was alive or dead. But he didn't send it. Instead, he got up, walked into the trailer, and went to the bedroom closet. At the back, behind the toolboxes and dusty mementos, he found the box he hadn't opened since Eleanor left. Inside was the wedding photo album, a few cards they'd exchanged, and a crumpled envelope. Inside the yellowed envelope was a letter Eleanor had written to him a few months before she disappeared, a letter he'd found later, when he finally worked up the courage to go through her things. Jack, I'm writing this because I don't have the courage to say it out loud. We're slowly dying in this town. You can't see it because you've convinced yourself this is our only option. But I wake up every day feeling like I can't breathe. Remember when you promised me it would only be for a year, that we'd save up enough money and head to the coast? I believed that. For years, I believed that one day you'd say, "It's time, Elle. Let's get out of here." But that never happened. And now I see that it never will. You've put down roots here. You've created an identity as the dependable man, the hard worker. I respect that. But I can't live like this. Please, let's go before it's too late. Before we become strangers living in the same house. Before I start blaming you for my unfulfilled dreams. There's still time for us, Jack, but it's running out fast. With love and despair, Eleanor Jackson had never responded to the letter. At the time, he convinced himself that she was just going through a rough patch, that things would get better when they could save a little more, when the timing was right. The moment never came. Closing the old letter in one hand and staring at the recent email on his phone, Jack felt something inside him break, not his heart, which had been broken for years, but the illusion he had nurtured, the fantasy that one day Eleanor would return, repentant, realizing she had made a terrible mistake, and they would pick up where they left off. She was fine. She had built a new life, had children, the children he had always promised her when things got better. She had moved on completely, while he had remained frozen in time like a bug trapped in amber. With a deep sigh, Jackson walked back out onto the porch. The desert sky was a stunning display of stars. The one thing Eleanor genuinely loved about this place. She used to say that the stars in Clayton Valley were the brightest in the world because they had no competition, no city lights, no hope, no future, just vast emptiness. You were right about everything, Elle, he murmured to the sky. Except for one thing. I didn't put down roots here. I just stopped growing. With a clarity he hadn't felt in years, Jackson turned back to his phone and began typing. Eleanor, or Laura, if you prefer. I won't lie and say your message didn't hit me like a punch in the gut. 7 years is a long time to be in limbo. I reread your old letter regularly, the one I found after you left. You were right about everything. I trapped us here with empty promises of someday. And when you tried to warn me that I was suffocating, I didn't listen. I can't say I forgive you. Not yet. But I do understand. And in a way, your unexplained departure was exactly what I deserved for years of ignoring your desperate pleas for change. Send the divorce papers. It's high time we both had some official closure. I sincerely hope you found the happiness you deserve. Your daughters are lucky to have a mother brave enough to seek a better life, even when the path is painful. As for me, your unexpected return was the wake-up call I needed. I finally understood that life doesn't wait for the right moment. I wish you and your family all the best, Jackson. He sent the email before he could change his mind. Then, he stared at the stars for a long time, feeling a strange mix of pain and relief. When he finally went to sleep, he made a decision. 3 months later, Jackson parked his rusty Ford F-150 in front of a small auto repair shop for sale in Santa Cruz, California. The building needed renovations. The yard was overgrown with weeds, and the price was right at the top of what he could afford with his life savings in the money from the sale of his trailer. It was perfect. You sure you want to do this, man? Donnie asked over the phone when Jackson called to break the news. I mean, you don't even know anyone in California. That's exactly why, Jackson replied, looking out at the Pacific waves in the distance. Time to meet new people, and maybe myself. The divorce papers had arrived 2 weeks after his email. Jackson signed them without hesitation and sent them back. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, that was the same day he saw the ad for the shop for sale. His phone buzzed with a notification. Another email from Eleanor. Jack, I heard you're moving to California. I am genuinely happy that you are taking this step. I know it is not easy to start over, especially after so much time in the same place. I am sure that your shop will be a success. You have always been the best mechanic I have ever known. I am not asking to see you or to be a part of your new life in any way. I just wanted you to know that I am rooting for you from afar. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if we had come together, as we had planned so many times. But I suppose these what-ifs are of no use to anyone now. If you ever need anything, or just want to have a coffee as 2 old friends with shared stories, I am here to help. With love, Eleanor. Jackson smiled slightly as he put the phone in his pocket without answering. Maybe one day, maybe when the wounds were completely healed, and he could look at her without seeing everything they had lost. For now, he was focused on the man he could become, free from the ghosts of the past and the broken promises. There was a saying Eleanor used to say, something about how it's never too late to be who you could have been. On the faded sign of the shop, he could picture the new name, already visualized on the blueprint he'd scribbled during long, sleepless nights. Second Chance Auto Repair, a second chance, not to get back what he'd lost, but to finally start living the life he'd always put off. The sea wind blew, bringing with it the smell of salt, impossibility. For the first time in 7 years, Jackson took a deep breath, not feeling the weight of Eleanor's absence. She'd left without saying goodbye, taking with her pieces of her heart that she'd never fully recovered. But she'd also inadvertently taught him a lesson that had taken him 7 years to learn. Sometimes you have to leave something behind to discover what's ahead of you. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered to himself with a small smile, using another of Eleanor's favorite expressions as he walked toward his new life. Better late than never.